The 1930s were a tough time. America was deep in the Great Depression. Millions of people had no jobs. Their families struggled to eat. Businesses failed. Banks closed down. The country was in a very bad spot. People felt hopeless. Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, became president in 1933. He promised a New Deal. This was his plan to get America back on its feet. He wanted the government to help people. He wanted to create jobs. He wanted to fix a broken economy. His New Deal programs were big. They set up things like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which gave young men jobs. They created the Public Works Administration, which built roads and schools. They put in place Social Security, which helped the elderly. Many people saw these programs as a lifesaver. They felt FDR was on their side. He gave them hope when there wasn't much around. But not everyone liked FDR or his New Deal. Some very powerful people saw him as a threat. These were often wealthy businessmen. They ran big companies, they owned factories and banks. They had a lot of money and influence. They thought FDR was taking too much power for the government. They hated his policies. They thought he was spending too much money. They feared he was moving America towards socialism. These men believed in less government. They believed in free markets. They thought FDR's plans were bad for business. They felt his taxes were too high. They worried about the future of their wealth and power. They talked among themselves. They voiced their strong disapproval of the president. They felt he was destroying the American way of life. This feeling of opposition grew stronger as FDR's programs became more established. The rich and powerful worried about their place in the new America FDR was trying to build. Their worries were not just about money, they were about control, they were about the way the country should be run. They felt their traditional power was slipping away. They saw FDR as an enemy of their values. He was shaking up the old order. This made them very nervous. One person central to this story was Smedley Butler. He was not just any man. He was a retired Marine Corps Major General. He was a highly decorated war hero. He had fought in many wars. He had won the Medal of Honor twice. He was a legend in the military. People respected him. They trusted him. He was known for his blunt talk and his honesty. He had a reputation for saying what he thought, no matter who it upset. After retiring, Butler became a vocal critic of war. He wrote a famous book called War is a Racket. He believed that wars were often fought for profit, not for true national interest. This made him a bit of an outsider among some military types, but it also made him popular with many ordinary Americans and veterans. He was a man of the people despite his high rank. He understood the struggles of the common soldier. He understood the struggles of regular folks. Butler was also a strong supporter of veterans' rights. He had led a large group of veterans, the Bonus Army, in 1932. They marched on Washington, D.C. to demand money promised to them. This event showed his leadership and his commitment to ordinary people. It also showed he wasn't afraid to stand up to authority, even the government. So, here you had a president, FDR, with powerful enemies among the wealthy, and you had a respected, outspoken general, Smedley Butler, who was known for his integrity and his concern for the common person. These two elements, the strong opposition to FDR and the character of Butler, set the stage for a very strange story. It was a story about a possible plot. A plot so big it aimed to change the course of American history. It was a story about the business plot, a story that still makes people wonder today about how close America came to a very different path. And it's a story about a time when fear and power mixed in a dangerous way. This general, Smedley Butler, would soon find himself in the middle of it all. He would be approached with an idea that was both shocking and disturbing. It was an idea for a coup. It was 1934. The country was still hurting, and the anger against FDR among certain groups was still boiling. These groups, mainly wealthy industrialists and bankers, were convinced FDR was bad for America. They were desperate for a way to stop him. One of these men was a bond salesman named Gerald McGuire. He worked for a firm called Grayson MP Murphy & Co. This company was linked to powerful figures on Wall Street. McGuire seemed to be the messenger for these wealthy interests. He started approaching people, trying to find someone who could lead a movement. McGuire's plan was to find a charismatic leader, someone who was well known, someone who had military respect, someone who could command a large following. He thought of Smedley Butler. Butler had led the Bonus Army. He was a hero, he was outspoken, he seemed like the perfect person to lead a movement. The idea McGuire presented was vague at first. He talked about the need to help veterans. He talked about creating a new organization. He said it would be made up of veterans. It would be a powerful force. This organization, he suggested, would put pressure on Washington. But his true intentions, Butler would later claim, were much darker. McGuire spoke of a large sum of money. He said there was $50 million available. This money would fund the new organization. This was a massive amount in the 1930s. It showed the level of commitment from the people behind him. McGuire told Butler that the country needed a strong leader. He said that FDR was weak. He claimed FDR was ill. He said FDR couldn't handle the Depression. McGuire suggested that a new position should be created. Something like a Secretary of General Affairs. This new position would effectively run the country. The president would remain as a figurehead. He would just be there for show. And who would fill this new powerful role? McGuire proposed Smedley Butler. He wanted Butler to lead this new veterans organization. Then, he wanted Butler to march on Washington. This march would be like the Bonus Army March, but much bigger. It would involve 500,000 men. These men would demand changes. They would demand a new leader for the country. The real goal, McGuire implied, was to pressure FDR to step aside, or at the very least to give up his power to this new Secretary of General Affairs. It was a plot to install a dictator chosen by the powerful interests, a dictator who would rule from behind the scenes, and Butler would be that dictator, or at least the public face of the new regime. McGuire was not alone in this. He brought in other people to talk to Butler. One was a man named Robert Sterling Clark. He was an heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune. He was a very wealthy man. Clark offered to pay for Butler's expenses. He offered to finance the new veterans organization. This showed Butler that the plot had serious financial backing. It wasn't just talk. Butler listened to these proposals. He heard the talk of fascism. McGuire reportedly admired Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy. He spoke of Mussolini's rise to power. He described how Mussolini used veterans to gain control. He suggested a similar path for America. This was alarming to Butler. He was an American patriot. He had fought for democracy. The idea of a fascist coup in his own country was deeply disturbing. The meetings happened over several months. McGuire kept pressing Butler. He kept offering more details. He talked about the need for a force. He talked about guns. He talked about how to rally the veterans. He explained how they would be organized. He even talked about making a uniform for the new organization. He showed drawings of flags for this new group. Butler was a clever man. He was experienced. He knew how these things worked. He pretended to go along with some of it. He listened carefully. He gathered information, but he was also deeply suspicious. He found the whole idea repulsive. He knew this was not about helping veterans. It was about something much bigger. Something much more sinister. He realized he was being asked to lead a coup, a plot to overthrow the president. A plot to change America into a fascist state. And he knew who was behind it. These were the rich and powerful men who hated FDR. They were willing to do anything to stop him, even if it meant destroying American democracy. This was the core of what the business plot was all about. It was a proposal for a military takeover, led by a beloved general, all to install a fascist-leaning government controlled by big business. And it was now in the hands of Smedley Butler. General Smedley Butler listened. He heard the proposals from Gerald McGuire and his associates. He understood what they were asking him to do. He understood the scale of the plan. They wanted him to lead 500,000 veterans. They wanted him to march on Washington. They wanted him to force FDR out of power, or at least to force FDR to become a puppet. Butler was not fooled. He saw through their talk of helping veterans. He knew the real goal was to install a new government. A government that would serve the interests of the powerful businessmen. He knew it was a fascist plot. And he wanted no part of it, but Butler did not immediately refuse. He didn't want to scare them off. He wanted to learn more. He wanted to know who else was involved. He wanted to know how serious they were. So he played along. He pretended to be interested. He asked questions. He let them reveal more of their plans. He gathered evidence. He kept track of who he met. He remembered what they said. He knew this was a very serious matter. It was treason, and he felt it was his duty to report it. He was a loyal American. He had served his country faithfully for decades. He was not going to let a group of rich men destroy American democracy. Butler decided to go to the authorities. He went to the Philadelphia branch of the FBI. He told them what he had learned. He told them about McGuire. He told them about the money. He told them about the planned march. He told them about the fascist ideas. The FBI listened to him. They took his claim seriously, but they also had to be careful. This was a claim against very powerful people. It could be easily dismissed as crazy talk, so they advised him to continue gathering information. They told him to be careful. Meanwhile, the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, was formed. This committee was tasked with investigating subversive activities in the United States. It was a temporary committee at this point, but it had a broad mandate. They started to hear whispers of a plot against the government. They heard about a general who had been approached. Butler then took his story directly to Congress. He went into HUAC. He gave his testimony in secret. This was a very important step. He laid out everything he knew. He named names. He described the meetings. He explained the nature of the plot. He talked about McGuire's visits to him. He talked about McGuire's talk of Mussolini. He talked about the $50 million. His testimony was detailed. He explained how McGuire showed him drawings of an emblem for a new veterans organization. He described how McGuire suggested he needed a force of 500,000 men. He even testified that McGuire offered him specific sums of money, mentioning a figure of $250,000 to lead this movement. Butler stressed that the idea was for him to become a dictator in a pseudo-fascist government, with FDR remaining only as a figurehead. Other witnesses were called. McGuire himself was called to testify, but McGuire denied many of Butler's claims. He admitted to meeting Butler. He admitted to talking about veteran organizations. But he claimed his intentions were innocent. He said he just wanted to help veterans. He said he was interested in a new kind of currency. He tried to make it sound like Butler had misunderstood him. However, McGuire's testimony was inconsistent. He contradicted himself. He dodged questions. He was evasive. His story did not quite line up. The committee found him to be a difficult witness. The secret nature of the testimony was important. The committee wanted to gather all the facts first. They didn't want to cause a panic. They didn't want to make public accusations against powerful people without solid proof. They knew the implications were huge. If true, this was an attempt to overthrow the government. It was an attack on American democracy itself. Butler's bravery in coming forward was clear. He put his reputation on the line. He knew he could be ridiculed. He knew powerful people would try to discredit him. But he believed it was his duty. He believed he had to expose this plot. He believed he had to protect the country from these forces. The committee continued its investigation. They listened to more witnesses. They gathered more information. The weight of Butler's testimony was significant. He was a man of unquestionable character. His word carried a lot of weight, and his account of the plot was very detailed and specific. It painted a picture of a serious attempt to subvert the government. It pointed to a direct threat to the office of the president and the constitutional order of the United States. This was no small accusation. It demanded a full and serious investigation. The ball was now in HUAC's court. They had to decide what to do with this explosive information. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, had heard the testimony. They had heard Smedley Butler's detailed account. They had heard Joe McGuire's denials and evasions. They had to make a decision. What was the truth? What would they tell the public? On November 24th, 1934, HUAC issued its report. It was a bombshell. The committee concluded that a plot did exist. They stated that there is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. This was a strong statement. They essentially confirmed Butler's story. The report specifically mentioned McGuire. It said that McGuire did approach Butler. It said McGuire did talk about forming a large veterans organization. It said McGuire did suggest a figurehead president. It said McGuire did talk about the need for a strong man. And it confirmed that the money for such a plot was available. The committee called the plot fantastic, but also serious. However, the committee did not name the wealthy individuals behind McGuire. They said they lacked conclusive evidence to directly link specific financiers to the plot. They noted that the conversations Butler had with McGuire were often one-on-one. This made it harder to get absolute proof against the bigger players. They indicated that powerful, moneyed interests were indeed behind it, but without pointing fingers at specific, well-known individuals, the public reaction was mixed. When the report became public, it caused a stir. It was big news. People were shocked. The idea of a plot to overthrow the president right there in America seemed unbelievable. Many people found it hard to believe that such a thing could happen, especially involving such powerful and respected figures. The media coverage was varied. Some newspapers, especially those that supported FDR, treated the report seriously. They highlighted the danger to democracy. They used it as evidence of the extreme lengths FDR's enemies would go to. They warned about fascism creeping into America, but other newspapers, particularly those against FDR, were skeptical. They downplayed the story. They called it a joke. They suggested that Butler was exaggerating. They questioned his credibility. They said it was just political maneuvering. They implied it was a way for FDR to make his opponents look bad. And many people hearing about the plot just thought it sounded too outlandish to be true. A plot involving a decorated general, 500,000 men, and a secret rich cabal? It sounded like something out of a spy novel. They struggled to reconcile this incredible story with the reality of American politics. Despite the committee's findings, no one was ever prosecuted. No one went to jail. Gerald McGuire was not charged with any crime. The wealthy individuals who were suspected of being behind the plot were never named publicly by the government in a formal accusation, let alone charged. This lack of legal action became a big point of contention. Why were there no prosecutions? There are several theories. One is that the evidence, while compelling from Butler's testimony, was not strong enough for a criminal trial. Proving intent and conspiracy in a court of law is harder than making a finding in a congressional committee. Butler's claims were largely based on verbal conversations. There wasn't a smoking gun document. Another theory is that the government, and perhaps FDR himself, decided not to pursue charges. They may have feared the consequences. Charging such powerful and influential people could have caused massive political instability. It could have divided the country even further. It could have exposed the deep fault lines in American society. Some believe FDR was content with the plot being exposed and the plotters being exposed as disloyal without having to endure a divisive trial. Perhaps the goal was to simply neutralize the threat and scare off future plotters rather than to punish individuals. Also, the plotters, if they truly existed, were very wealthy and well-connected. They would have mounted a powerful legal defense. Such a trial would have been incredibly expensive and difficult for the government to win. There might have been a feeling that exposing the plot was enough to stop it, and that a trial would only create more chaos. So the official outcome was a committee report confirming the existence of a plot. But with no arrests, no trials, no convictions, this left many questions unanswered. It left many people wondering, did the plot really happen, or was it an exaggeration? Was it a misunderstanding, or was it a real threat that was simply swept under the rug for political reasons? The lack of prosecutions meant that the full truth, with all its details and actors, never fully came out in a court of law. And so the business plot remained a shadowy episode in American history, confirmed by a congressional committee, but never fully resolved by the justice system. The business plot, despite the Hawk Report, never led to arrests or trials. This lack of legal action has fueled debate for decades. Was it real, or was it mostly hot air? The answer is not simple. Many historians and people who believe Butler's account see it as a very real and serious threat. They point to the Hawk Report itself. The congressional committee concluded there was a plot. They point to Butler's impeccable reputation. He was a war hero, a man of integrity. Why would he invent such a story? He had nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward. His career was already over. His only motivation seemed to be patriotism. These supporters also look at the historical context. The 1930s were a time of great instability. Fascism was on the rise in Europe. Dictators like Mussolini and Hitler were gaining power. There was a real fear that similar movements could take hold in America. Some rich Americans admired these strongman leaders. They saw them as a way to maintain order and protect wealth. So the idea of a fascist-leaning coup was not entirely far-fetched for that era. They also point to the deep animosity many wealthy individuals had towards FDR. They truly believed he was destroying the country. Their hatred was intense. It's plausible that some of them would consider extreme measures to remove him. The $50 million mentioned by McGuire, if true, showed a serious commitment of funds. That kind of money doesn't get thrown around lightly. On the other hand, skeptics have always existed. They argue that the plot was fantastic, as the Hawk Report itself described it. They suggest that McGuire might have been a fantasist, exaggerating his connections and plans. They suggest Butler, while honest, might have misinterpreted McGuire's intentions. Perhaps McGuire was just trying to impress Butler, or seeking to gain money for a less sinister veterans group. These skeptics also highlight the lack of hard evidence. No written orders, no direct testimony from the alleged financiers. Everything hinged on Butler's word against McGuire's, and McGuire denied the most serious claims. Without the named powerful figures being directly implicated with irrefutable proof, it's hard to be certain. The fact that no one was prosecuted is also a major point for skeptics. If it was such a clear and present danger, why didn't the government take legal action? Some believe this means the evidence was simply too weak. Others suggest it was a political maneuver. FDR's administration might have wanted to discredit his opponents without a messy trial. Or perhaps the plot was small enough that exposing it was enough to stop it, without the need for a full-blown legal battle against very powerful people. The business plot remains a fascinating footnote in American history. It continues to be discussed in books, documentaries, and online forums. It serves as a warning. It reminds us that even in a democracy, the threat of anti-democratic forces can arise from unexpected places. It shows that even powerful and respected figures can be tempted by extremist ideas, especially during times of crisis. What we learn from it is important. We learn about the fragility of democracy. We learn that powerful interests can sometimes work against the will of the people. We learn about the importance of integrity, as shown by Smedley Butler, who put his country before personal gain or power. His decision to expose the plot, rather than participate in it, is a testament to his character. The story of the business plot also highlights the challenges of investigating high-level conspiracies. When powerful people are involved, evidence can be hard to come by, witnesses can be intimidated, the truth can be murky, and political considerations can often overshadow purely legal ones. Even today, the business plot forces us to ask questions about power. Who truly holds it? How is it used? And what happens when those in power feel threatened? It's a story that continues to resonate, not because all its details are perfectly clear, but because the central idea, a secret attempt to overthrow a democratically elected leader, is deeply unsettling. It's a reminder that freedom requires constant vigilance, and that sometimes the most incredible stories turn out to have a kernel of truth. The business plot, even with its lingering ambiguities, remains a stark reminder of a tense period in American history, when democracy itself seemed to hang in the balance, challenged by those who felt they knew better how the country should be run.